Hello guys, welcome back to another chess video. This is Amit here, and today I'll be showing you an interesting game played by Fischer and Spassky. Fischer works with white pieces and he opens the game with e4. So black responds, Spassky responds with the e5 and knight f3, knight c6 and bishop b5, which is the Ruy Lopez. So in the Ruy Lopez, the bishop always comes to the b5 square and attacks the knight, and in exchange variation he captures the knight, and in other variations when the pawn is pushed to a6, then he moves his bishop back, which is what happens in Ruy Lopez opening. But here he goes for an exchange. So once a6 is played, he captures the knight on the c6 square, and once the knight is actually captured, black captures with the d7 pawn. So since the d7 pawn has captured the knight, so what happens here, then we are always taught that the pawn should always come towards the center of the board, but here the pawn is moving towards the sides of the board. So the advantage here is he is opening the diagonal for his bishop on the c8 to move anywhere, and it is for development. So he is one move ahead in development because he has opened his bishop diagonal, whereas white is yet to open the d3, open with d3, and open the diagonal for the bishop on the c1. So that is why black is slightly ahead in development, but in white also has a compensation because black pawn is moving towards the side of the board, whereas it should always remain at the center, but it has moved down towards the side of the board. So these are plus and minuses of black and white. So he castles, white castles, and f6. So the pawn on the e5 square is actually hanging, so he plays f6 because before castling, if knight takes the pawn on the e5 like this, then queen comes to d4 attacking the pawn and the knight. The knight has to come back and this pawn will be captured, and queen has to come to e2, and it will be exchanged, and this is kind of equal position because both the sides have the same number of pawns and majority is also on the same side. So, or you can say it as equal number of pawns on the both the sides of the board. So this position happens. So he generally does not take the pawn on the e5 square, instead he castles. Now there is a threat of taking the pawn on the e5. So now if black may place any other move other than guarding the pawn like bishop c5, then white has an opportunity to take the pawn on the e5, and if now same position occurs, then white responds back with knight f3 and giving away the pawn. So now if black is greedy and captures the pawn, so rook e1 pins the queen, and he will be a major piece up, which is a queen for a rook. So this position occurs, so hence black plays f6 and white goes ahead with development of the pawn, so that he clears the diagonal for the c1 bishop, and he plays the pawn to d4. Now black captures, knight captures, c5, and knight is attacked. He comes back, exchanges of the queen, and bishop comes to g4 attacking the knight, attacking the rook. So here white has option of playing f3, which is what happens in the game. So black is provoking the move f3, so for his development. So white pushes the pawn to f3 and black plays bishop to e6 attacking the knight on the b3 square. So, and also like now knight is played to c3 and bishop d6. These are all normal developing moves. Now there is a threat of taking the pawn on the c5 square. So in order to prevent the pawn to be grabbed by the two pieces, he plays the move b6, Now this game has converted into black having a majority on the queen side, whereas white having a majority on the king side. So there are 4 pawns for white on the king side and 4 pawns on the black's queen side. But as the game progresses, we get to know how white attacks the weakness created here on the b6 square. This is actually kind of weak square, and c6 is also weak for black. So black castles and white pushes the pawn to a5, now attacking the b6 pawn. Now black defends the pawn twice, because now if any other move is played, then white captures the b6 pawn and a6 will be hanging because of this attack on the rook, attack by the rook. So in order to guard the a6 once the pawn captures the b6 pawn, he plays king to b7 and e5. This is a very nice move played here. This is sacrifice is for like a positional sacrifice, because you can observe here that the rook on the d8 is actually unguarded, so bishop cannot capture the pawn, only the pawn has to capture the pawn. So now if pawn captures the pawn, then knight comes here attacking the c5 square, and there is a chance of white sacrificing the knight for pawn and gaining this particular bishop with a check, because bishop cannot take the bishop because rook will be hanging. So this position, white is having a position price upon. Then the next move is to capture the pawn on the b6, and then king only has to capture this, and this is kind of positional weakness for black. So this Spassky observes, and he gets his bishop back to e7. So he isn't greedy to grab the pawn and give up a positional advantage for black. So here white plays rook takes the rook and bishop takes the rook, and as I told you before, the same attack is now coming with the move of knight to e4. Now the knight has moved to e4, and the next move is to sacrifice the knight for the pawn on the c5 and capture back the e6 bishop. So here black has observed this, and he has played the move king to c6, and he has guarded the pawn on the c5, and now he is ready to give up his a6 pawn for free. So white captures the pawn on the b6. Now we can observe here that lot of pieces of black are still at their home position and are not developed, whereas all the white's pieces are well developed, and this is what gives white a considerable amount of advantage. So now black captures the pawn on the b6, and now knight is sacrificed here. White has observed that his opponent's piece are at home, and hence he has captured the pawn on the c5, giving away the pawn and giving away the knight, and rook captures a6, and anyways black has to give back the piece, so which we will see in the game. So instead of capturing back the knight, bishop goes to c8 in order to prevent the rook from coming to open file. So knight captures a6. Now black captures the pawn with the pawn, and he is actually a pawn down because of the c5 and the a6 pawn being captured by the white hand. So this has given white an advantage, and he plays knight to b4 attacking the king, and he is given a check. So black plays here black has a move of playing here, but At this position, Spassky actually resigned the game because he's already down one pawn, and next the pawn on the uh, e5 or the b6 might be lost, because he has played the king to b7. Now once king goes to b7, then knight gives check and king comes here, knight captures the bishop, king captures, rook gives check, and he comes to c7 or d7, then rook gives again check, then he goes back, then this pawn is captured. So the position was slightly worse, almost fully worse, and white is 2 pawns up. So black has no hope of getting an advantage in this kind of position. So at this point, Spassky resigned the game, and it was a very well played victory for Fischer, and he is simply a piece up. And this game was actually played in the year 1992, and was a memorable one too, because of positional gameplay with attacking chess. So hope you like this video. If you like this video and want me to post many such videos, please respond in the comment section. Thank you.